All right, guys. So November is in the books. And I decided after trying to write a blog post recapping November for about an hour that it just came across really poorly in text. So I think a video recap is a better way to approach this and go through the month and just kind of cover some of the highlights and lowlights. Of course, I decided that I needed to start doing this to hold myself accountable a little bit better because there are some goals I really need to work on as a trader. I've got to improve some sloppy habits I've gotten into. And I like to talk about my mistakes. I like to learn from them, and doing it like this and having that extra degree of accountability, it really is helpful for me. What led me up to this was just increased frustration of seemingly having a couple weeks of good consistent trading like I know I'm capable of, and then just a couple big emotional mistakes, failing to cut a loss, and letting a couple losers wipe out a few weeks of hard work. It's a really frustrating way to trade, and it's a habit that I seem to have fallen into more in the last 6 months than ever before, so I need to break myself of it. October, I think, was where I finally crossed over the boiling point a little bit when it comes to this stuff. And I did do a blog post about this a little bit. For those of you who haven't read it yet, tradetheticker.blogspot.com. The post is titled Working to Break a Slump. And I do go into a bit of what was frustrating me and why I felt like I needed to change. But basically, beginning of October, in the span of a couple days, I took about $40,000 in losses. The first loss was about $25,000, and it was just my typical, getting in a bit early on the front side of a short and failing to cut a loser and letting it run way out of control on me. And then the next $15,000 actually had started off as a very nice profit. I think I was up 20,000 unrealized on it at one point. It was the breakout of AVXL back when it was still in OTC, and I played it too big. I think I did because I had about 80,000 shares, and I really shouldn't have been in that large. But then I got stubborn when the breakout wasn't going as far as I wanted, as quickly as I wanted. And on the second day of the breakout, when it rolled over red, I actually talked myself into holding that and getting stubborn, hoping that they were just trapping. And it turns out I had to eat the loss, much lower than my entry, and tacked on another $16,000 in losses. And that was, again, because I was making some uncharacteristic emotional mistakes, talking myself into doing something I wouldn't normally do, trying to make back an earlier loss. So I got a long time off in October after those losses. I had my wedding, and that was absolutely incredible. And of course, that comes before the market, so I was taking time off for that anyway. But even after the wedding, even after the honeymoon, I decided to take another week and a half or so off. I came back from the honeymoon, and I just didn't feel ready to come back. I needed a little more time away from the market to clear my head. And I did come back to trading the last week of October. And I said to myself that I had a few goals. I wanted to trade smaller, first of all, because until I got my losers under control, I just didn't want to keep throwing away $40,000 in a span of a couple of days when I made huge mistakes or big emotional mistakes. So I needed to size down because I recognized that until I'm trading well, I have no business trading size. So my first goal was to trade only $1,000 risk. And then, of course, the other goals that came with that were I needed to cut losses better, I needed to keep my emotions more in check. And so I took a few steps towards making this happen. I read a couple trading books, and I started to track every single one of my losers. I had this nice little losses journal. I'll flip over to it here. And at first, in November, I was tracking every single loss I took, and I was trying to see, okay, what happened? What's the description of the loss? What can I learn from this loss? And how do I plan to improve? And I was very meticulous about this. And off to the side, I would actually even go as far as to track my most common mistakes. So for example, if I played too large, it would get a tally. If I didn't cut my loss, it would get a tally. FOMO, fear of missing out. And then I had a few others in there too. But after a while of tracking, it became clear that these were my three main issues. Trades that I forced because I was afraid of missing a trade, trades where I didn't cut the loss, and trades where I just sized in very irresponsibly. So I decided that these were the three main things I'm going to track for now, and these are my three main goals of what I need to improve upon. And I do have to give some credit here to one of the trading books I read called The Daily Trading Coach, 101 Lessons to Becoming Your Own Trading Psychologist, or I think the subtitle is something like that. But I pulled this idea of tracking losses straight from that book, and it's really made a big difference. I've really enjoyed tracking the losers. But anyway, so I started tracking my losers. I started trying to be very careful about my trades, trade less, wait for the best setups, keep my size small. And I ripped off 10 green days in a row right after getting back. The last week of October, all green days, and this first week in November here, all green days. And it was actually pretty good money. I think in those 2 weeks, the last week of October wasn't too much. I made about $4,000. But I'm saying not too much compared to the first week in November, which was $26,000. Now, part of the reason the first week in November was so profitable, a lot of it came down to this big green day on Tuesday. And a little over $12,000 of those gains was buying the XOMA breakout. And the XOMA breakout, it was one that had been on my radar for a while. I'd actually had a couple FOMO trades on that one before where I took small losers. But I finally ripped through, broke through 140. I missed the front side. I missed the initial spike through 140. I did not buy any into strength. But I started accumulating dips throughout the day as it was holding up, gapped it into the next day, and sold along the way into the morning spike. And it turned out to be a really nice gain. Now, when I did start into XOMA, I did have a little bit more risk. I had about $3,000 of risk at first on that. And the way I had justified that was I had a little bit vague of a goal end of October and early November, where I had said to myself, okay, if it's a truly great setup, I can play bigger. I can say I can go bigger than the $1,000 risk, but I never really said how much bigger. So a few $1,000s, that was probably a little more than it should have been. And I actually got burned later on because I didn't define that very well. And I also didn't define what is an elite setup. Multi-day breakout, it's one of my favorites. It's one of the ones I'm very comfortable with. But I never actually wrote down, hey, these are the setups where I'm allowed to trade a little bit more size. And so more on that later on how that got me into trouble. But that XOMA play, it was a big highlight for me. And it was really nice, and it was a big confidence boost because I said, wow, I'm trying to bring down my risk a bit, and I just had a pretty solid green week, and I'm on pace to still make a good amount of money this month. So I started to fall into thinking about the profit loss a little bit too much. And then week 2, things got a little bit choppier and a little bit worse. I opened up November 9th with a $1,600 loss on the day. Certainly nothing catastrophic. Certainly a very small loss in relation to the gains I had had so far in the month. So it really didn't throw me emotionally or mentally too much. I felt okay after that Monday. And Tuesday I had a bigger green day than Monday's red day. So I was back on track. I was having a green week and I felt good. And at this point, SPHS was setting up. And SPHS, just your typical crappy low float stock that had had a nice run. And I was a little bit overeager to play that. And I think that because I had played that bigger size on XOMA the week before, and I had made that extra money, and because I was 2 days into the week and up less than $1,000, I got a bit antsy. And I started saying to myself that I needed to push a little bit to make something happen because I wanted to keep having good weeks. I wanted to, prove, almost what a great trader I was to myself, that I could keep on making money hand over fist when I'm trying to size down risk. And as a result, Wednesday and Thursday, I took some really silly losses on SPHS. And we can even take a look at those in the loss journal. And later, I will actually post a link to this loss journal so you can take the time to go through all of this yourself and see all the details. But SPHS, the big one that really started things off on the wrong foot was this $5,000 loss I took on the 11th. And that was very much motivated by fear of missing out because, like I said, it's a crappy low float stock that had run a lot, and it had this big crack and fade off of its highs. And I thought, oh crap, I missed this. This stock is dead now. I can't believe that I just let this opportunity come and go without playing it. And so I talked myself into shorting a very weak bounce. And not only that, but I talked myself into shorting that very weak bounce and playing a very wide risk because I was saying, oh, there's just no way this will come back. And if that's how you want to trade, if you want to have the really wide risk, there's nothing wrong with that, but I sized in very inappropriately for that. I should have been playing super small size, risking $1,000. Instead, I wound up with $5,000 of risk somehow. And again, I think it was just because I was thinking about with how wide of a risk I was using, I would only be able to play a couple thousand shares if I wanted to trade that small, and that seemed stupid to me. So I talked myself into a really silly risk, and I talked myself into it being a high odds trade, even though it really wasn't one of my bread and butter setups. And this is where not having that number in my head of even on the best setups, I can't risk more than X came into play, because I started thinking, I put the pressure on myself. I needed to have another XOMA. I needed to have another big win. And unfortunately, SPHS, it surprised me, and it came back, and I had to eat the loss at my very wide risk point. And that loss turned into $5,000. And that, I think, is where mentally I started to lose it a bit and started to go on tilt. And so later, SPHS got me again. It had a multi-day breakout. And again, I love multi-day breakouts. I thought, okay, well, now it's going to squeeze big. And the breakout failed. And that was a combination of, again, sizing in a little bit too big. I think I put on about $3,000 risk on it again. And there was a little bit of a failure to cut losses in there too, because after the breakout had gone sideways for a while, there was a pretty clear cut point where I knew I had to get out if it snapped below there. And I let it snap and I didn't react, and then it just wiped out. It panicked so hard. And I wound up having to chase panic a little bit and made the loss much worse than it had to be. So a few $1,000s there. And then one more SPHS emotional loss on, at the end of the day. I remember this one. This was purely an emotional loss, because what I did was, after its big breakout fail and panic, it had a good bounce. It had recovered a decent amount and then dipped down again. So I still was talking myself into it long best. I, for whatever reason, was just bound and determined not to miss this trade. Oh no, what if they gap it up? What if they break it out more tomorrow? I have to have shares. So I bought some shares, again, way too much size, because there's nothing elite about this setup at this point. I'm just buying, a weak ABCD, hoping it works out. I had about $4,000 of risk on the table, a little bit less, and then I had to walk away because I had to go meet up with my personal trainer. So I wasn't even able to watch it into the market close. I just put in a stop loss and hoped for the best. And by the time I got to the gym and looked at the phone, I saw that the stop had triggered. So that was completely fear of missing out, and emotions and frustration. So that was my main frustration and my main mistake from that week was SPHS. I just let that chew me up, and I made so many mistakes on it. And while I had some other gains elsewhere to help offset those losses a little bit, still was a red week. Still was negative almost $5,200. And then week 3, it got even worse. I opened up the week okay again, had a nice solid green day on Monday. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, just more stupidity. Tuesday was, it was the GNC short. I believe there were all these rumors about GNC was going to have some kind of fraud allegations brought against it. I don't even remember what it was. But basically there was bad news, and it had this big morning panic and then a big midday bounce. And nothing wrong with shorting into a big bounce when you think it might fade back off, but again, just terrible sizing in on my part. I think I took a small acceptable loss on it the first time I tried, and the second time I tried, I dug in my heels, I fought it, I added size, I failed to cut a loss on my starter. I did everything wrong on it, and again, you can read the details on that yourself later. But it was a $7,000 loss, so which is way outside of my $1,000 norm and my $1,000 goal. And because I was so frustrated, the next day on AVXL, I made my typical mistake. I was shorting the front side of a move. I didn't cut the entire loss. I started fighting it and adding and adding and adding, and eventually I had to eat it all, and I lost $13,000 there. So it was, I believe, right after that AVXL day that I made that blog post about working to break a slump. Because I said, okay, I came back, I had my great start, I was doing great for 10 days in a row and following my rules, and then I fell right back into bad habits. And part of what the Daily Trading Coach talks about is how easy it is for people to initiate change, but the difficult part is sustaining change. So I figured the blog post and the extra accountability might help me sustain change. It might help me sustain, following my rules for more than 2 weeks at a time. And so far, ever since then, it's been real good. I mean, I think I got a big confidence boost out of not getting caught in the huge KBIO squeeze. That was definitely a big moral boost to me, because even after I had my horrible day with AVXL, to see that KBIO just go absolutely crazy after hours and squeeze from 2 to 20, 2 to 20 or 2 to 24 or something like that, and not be in front of that move and getting my account blown up, I was kind of proud of myself, to be honest, for avoiding that. And then Thursday, I came out of the gate with a pretty clear head on it and nailed a decent-sized short. And since then, it's been all green days. I'm now on a 7-day green streak, it looks like, and going into December with a little bit of momentum. Now, I haven't been perfect about following my rules. Ever since the big AVXL loss, now I'm happy I've only made 2 mistakes since then. They are in the last 2 days of the month. One was this morning on HART. I just got reckless and wasn't really paying attention. And then EURI when I was flying last Wednesday. That was another one where I did a good job of getting out some of the loss, but then I let the rest ride because I fell into a hold and hope a little bit. Still room to improve. I'm still making some of these mistakes. I've been a lot better about FOMO trades, though, in the last couple of weeks, so I'm hoping to keep that up. But the big losers and the ones that really hurt me are the ones where I don't cut losses and the ones where I size in irresponsibly. So anyway, I'm working on defining a little bit better what are, the best setups that I am allowed to play a bit bigger. But I have defined very solidly that I am not allowed to trade more than $2,000 risk, even if it is one of my best setups. So as a result, November, it winds up being a good month overall. It's about a $41,000 month. And to a degree, it feels a little bit, it's hard not to compare where I was. It's hard not to compare how back in the summer and fall of 2014, I was having months that was almost near $200,000. So it's hard not to think back to that and then see a month that had all the opportunity that this month had and say, wow, is that all I made? But I've got to embrace the process, and I've got to focus on the trading and trading well and following my rules and not think about the profit loss because that's something that'll take care of itself. And once I prove that I can actually sustain change for more than a couple weeks and I can go a few months and cut down my mistakes, then I can start thinking about sizing up again and upping those risk levels a little bit. Maybe $1,500 risk normal and $3,000 risk for the very best plays will be my next step up. But I'm not ready for that yet. I'm only a couple weeks into trading well again, and I need to follow my rules for longer than that. So it's definitely something to just keep on working on going forward, and I'm not going to rush my way back. So the month of December, I can already tell you the entire month is going to be $1,000 risk for my typical plays, $2,000 for the very best opportunities. That risk will not go up all month. And I believe this month, let's see, if I look at my overall tallies, now I only made 13 mistakes, I guess, that were either played too large, didn't cut loss, or fear of missing out. And out of those, some of them were multiple. Some trades I made more than one mistake on, like AVXL here. I played too large and I didn't cut loss. So I have 6 played too larges in November. I have 6 didn't cut losses, and I have 9 fear of missing outs. I believe my primary goals for December are to get these 2 down. I want less than 6 of didn't cut loss and less than 6 of played too large. I'm going to strive for perfection, but I don't know if it's practical to expect perfection. But I can do better than this. And fear of missing out, while that's still one of my top goals, that's not a huge, that's not a huge mistake usually money-wise, so that's a little bit more secondary. I'm going to pour my main focus into these 2. But it's definitely a good start. It's definitely, something to build off of. And December, I'm just going to keep on working on getting better. And hopefully I have good things to report at the end of next month and I can close out the year strong. So thanks to you guys who watched and have made it this far. And by the way, thanks to all of you who left advice or words of encouragement or anything on my last post where I was talking about my struggles and sounding discouraged, because I really appreciate it. It's great to have the trading community there and know that people have got your back. So thank you guys all for the support. And yeah, so I'll just check in at the end of December, and hopefully I've got some improvement to report. Thanks, guys.